if we can make a start. We'll start, first of all, in terms of minutes of the last meeting of 11 September. Does anyone have any comments on the meeting or any questions arising from the meeting?
The only comments to say what wonderful minutes they were. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Any apologies for absence and substitutes, have you?
Yes, we have apologies from councillors Sam Pritchard and Ross Wellen.
Okay.
He might get here, he was running a bit late. So,
Okay. Any declarations of interest?
none prior to the meeting.
Okay. I'm pleased to say we've had a question from a member of the public, which is the first time we've had one. I would start by clarifying something. I think in the question you said that you believe you have to ask 10 days in advance. It's actually 4 days in advance.
Oh, is it right?
So you have to, and that's 4 working days, by the way, not just in the 4 days. So if you ask a question 4 working days in advance, and all this question came in later than that, we're actually pleased to try and answer it. First thing to say is that it's a very broad question actually, and because it was short notice, the question is how's the approach community wellbeing is monitored year on year. Well, the council does quite a lot of monitoring of these sort of issues, and we'll be talking about the things that we monitor later in this meeting. And Surrey does a lot of monitoring of community wellbeing things as well. So that's all available publicly. But in terms of answering your question, your follow-on question, how are we going to deal with matters arising due to government austerity and so on, that's such a general question. I think we feel we'll need a few days to think about it, and we'll give you an answer in writing. Okay? Is that okay?
Yes, no, I was particularly impressed by the Health Inequalities report and the loneliness and isolation presentation. And it was really thinking how that was going to be monitored.
Well, we'll be talking about that during this meeting. So thank you for your question. Question from members? Any questions from I don't think there are.
No, we saved no.
Okay, so the first thing is, in fact, a progress report on the health inequalities report was produced last year, and I think Louise and Wendy are going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chairman. So the committee will recall what an excellent piece of work was done on the health inequalities by the working group, and that was set up in September 17. To have a look at the reasons for the disparity in life expectancy between the different areas, the sort of perhaps the most affluent areas and the most challenged areas in Waverley. And the review looked at the wider determinants of health, such as housing, both in the public and the private sector, leisure, it looked at sort of risky behaviours, and it looked at planning policy. And I think it's fair to say that there was a certain level of scepticism from both members and officers about what role does Waverley Borough Council have in sort of determining, sort of having a look at some of these sort of health inequalities. What role do we have? And I think the working group really sort of put that to bed to say that there is a large role in the wider determinants of health, and I think the chairman, Councillor MacLeod, would often say, up to 70% of these wider determinants of health are actually something that the Waverley Borough and District Councils have quite a lot to do with. So it was an amazing piece of work, and I think it's set in train with quite a few actions, and I'll come to that in a little while, but it was quite unique in Surrey as well, and it got a lot of attention from a lot of people, so it was, as I say, a really good piece of work. And at the end of the review, we had a large number of recommendations, which I think people were quite sort of astonished at the number of recommendations in the report. And what we did is we pulled those into an action plan, and the majority of the ones that Waverley has, we can do something about ourselves. The first set of recommendations were to the executive, and they adopted those at their meeting. The second lot of recommendations were to the clinical commissioning groups, and Jenny Else, our portfolio holder, wrote to the CCGs and to Surrey County Council, which is the fourth area, to ask them for their, really, to say that we've done these recommendations, we gave them a copy of the report, and we'd like their support in sort of pursuing some of those recommendations. So for quite a while during the summer, we've been trying to organise a meeting with the Surrey Heart Plan, which is the integrated care system which covers Surrey. And I'm pleased to say we finally, although we had a few sort of stops and starts with it. We've finally got a meeting next week that Jenny will be attending with Calvin and myself with Surrey Heartlands to pursue some of this. That in itself is excellent, but I would really like to draw your attention to, as a committee, two other sort of things that are affecting that whole aspect of health. There's a new health agenda nationally. I don't know whether you noticed, a few weeks ago the Health Secretary sort of launched his a new document entitled "Prevention is Better Than Cure." That's a sort of builds on previous work that they've done on childhood obesity and social prescribing, and it paves the way for the Green Paper on national health, which is going to be published in 2019. But it firmly puts districts and boroughs in that picture of prevention, which I think is something that's new, something that we haven't had before. The other thing that you need to be aware of is the whole health architecture is changing. Kelvin's sort of been getting involved in this, and he might say a bit more about this later. It's quite a difficult architecture to describe, and we've all been scratching our heads about it. And there's so many acronyms: ICSs, ICPs, primary care networks. There's a whole load of stuff out there that you think, well, where is it going? What's happened in Surrey is that there's an integrated care system under which there are 3 integrated care partnerships. The integrated care system is Surrey Heartlands. There's an integrated care partnership that covers Waverley and Guildford. And these partnerships are expected to lead the planning, coordinating and delivery of care at a local level. And their intention is to bring all the health and social care partners to collaborate, including us as district councils and things like the ambulance service, to meet the needs of the local community. The organisational format is still being discussed, but in theory, there is a devolved model which has been carried out in the past in places like Manchester, but the devolved model would be to put all those health budgets together, which is actually quite a sort of transformational thing. And with the prevention side as well, there are possibly enormous opportunities for a district council in this context. So I just wanted to mention that, and the fact that there will be a stakeholders meeting being organised in January or February next year. We've only heard about it yesterday. Kelvin and I attended a workshop on sort of the new care model. And I would really recommend that we sort of get involved and attend those stakeholders to find out what's happening out there, because it's going to affect our residents massively. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Wendy, who's actually going to talk you through some of the highlights of the action plan.
Wendy, would you mind just before you just to
follow on?
I do apologise. What Louise has alluded to is actually it is transformational. So Manchester had a devolved health budget. What Surrey will be the second area to have a devolved health budget. This is coming in April 2019. So when Louise alludes to a change in health landscape, it is changing and changing extremely fast. And it's very important that you understand that the Health Inequalities Report was taken to the Integrated Care Partnership, the ICP for Guildford Waverley, and adopted and recognised. And through that work, I think I was fortunate enough to be asked to be the chair of their independence and prevention group. So now Louise and I will be sat on and directing that element of work for the Guildford and Waverley area. And I don't think it's too much. I think a lot of that came from the attention from the Health Inequalities Report, the health and wellbeing strategy that we've been putting together and updating. So I think so when there was a question who's going to chair, we were considered the right people to take that forward. So it's going to be a challenge. There's a lot of work. I think Louise and I were at a workshop yesterday, but there's a lot happening, but we're at the forefront of it, which is, I think, quite exciting. So I just want to cite Wendy.
No, it's actually encouraging.
Okay, so over the last month I've been working with officers to run through the 40 points on the action plan to just give you the progress update. And I just wanted to raise 2 or 3 points in particular with you. So one of the points is that we've now had the 2018 Waverley Local Authority Health Profile, and I'm currently comparing this with previous years. I'm working with our colleagues in public health to identify the changes and items of particular note, and I'm hoping to bring something to you in February for your next session that looks at those particular points. Also, the health and wellbeing strategy and action plan, you'll notice, gets quite a lot of mentions within the action plan. And interestingly, our question from the public, a member of the public, about how will we drive some of that sustainable delivery ongoing. So some of these points will be taken by Tamsin and her team and put into her new action plan that she's currently in progress of writing. So I think that was good news in terms of keeping momentum going. There are 2 or 3 health priority issues within the action plan, and councillors are receiving a report tonight on loneliness. I'm also working on the topic of financial inclusion, but there are 1 or 2 other areas of note in the action plan. So this is point 11. If the committee wanted to add anything to the work programme, mental health, alcohol issues and so forth, older people's health. So there's an opportunity at the end of our meeting tonight just to review the work programme. Place shaping is another point that is mentioned a number of times, and councillors will note that there's been some limited progress on these points, but the discussions are ongoing and we'll be keeping a watching brief on these points. There's also a number of planning related points in here, and I know that the planning team are aware of all these items and will be taking them forward as appropriate. And finally, just to say that the Citizens Advice Bureau has a contract with the DWP to work closely with the Universal Credit claimants, and officers are supporting on that work. So lots and lots of activity going on. Some of it's been completed, but quite a bit still ongoing. And hopefully in February we'll be looking to bring you some further information as a result of this action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or points, members?
Chairman, can I just ask, devolved budget has been mentioned at this end of the table, Colin, and I think integrated budgets were mentioned, but they are separate, is that right?
The integrated care system, of which there are a number of pilots, the next stage of that system is to go with the sort of devolved budget approach, and that's what's happening in Surrey.
So it's happening almost at the same time. And so they were looking at this integrated care system, and then
that would make sense.
Yeah.
So how much experience has there been in Manchester, for example? How effective? Is there any measures that say how effective it is yet?
I certainly don't have that information to hand off.
All that I've read and heard about it, it's been very effective because they've really pulled budgets from adult social care, children's services, district councils, health, and they're personally, I think that's the sort of the future, the way to go. With less and less budgets available, we've just got to make the most of our sort of pooled budgets, and that's, I gather, it's been very successful in Manchester. But we can bring that back to the committee.
Useful to bring that.
I couldn't agree more with you in terms of bringing different budgets together. I've never felt that demarcations between budgets or departments or anything are particularly helpful, and there's an overlap of work and objectives. So I do think it's very important to move in that direction.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Louise and I recently went to I can't remember when it was, but it was in the past couple of months, went to an event on health scrutiny, and Manchester was actually mentioned as sort of the one to aim for, sort of the gold standard, or sort of thereabouts. So that sort of said to us that that's the way we should be moving, but that's just something that Manchester is held up to be an ideal way to do it.
Well, obviously, Waverley and Surrey's got to sort of overtake that.
Any other points? Just say myself, actually, I'm very impressed with what's happening. There was always going to be a slight worry that Alex, who was the big driving force, left, of course, but I have to say his colleagues have picked it up and ran with it just as much as if Alex was still here, so that's very pleasing, and I'm quite impressed. There's so many action points here and so much happening. In terms of the effect it's had outside, I did actually even mention it to Jeremy Hunt when he was still Health Secretary, but unfortunately he's moved on now, but maybe we'll get it to the new Health Secretary through Jeremy. and increase Waverley's profile that way. Okay, any other points anyone wants to bring up in this item?
Can I just ask a trivial question?
Of course.
7/V11, 8/V11. What's the point in having two notations?
Sorry, Councillor, it's because the original report had so many different recommendations to differentiate between the 20 that were sort of in advance of the ones that are Waverley going to. A colleague recommended that we put it into Roman numerals, but now that it stands on its own, I mean, we could have got rid of those Roman numerals now. So we're just getting rid of
Correlate
those.
now, don't they?
Yeah, or it was just a sort of reference back to the original report, but I think we're getting rid of them now.
That makes us look quite intelligent. We understand Roman numerals.
Well, I hear that Manchester are now copying.
Okay. Are we ready to move on for any other points? Well, thank you very much for that. So the next item is this vaping and loneliness. Kelvin's going to take us through that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, at a previous ONS committee, we had a very informative presentation on loneliness and isolation, and it made us think, and obviously put that priority of what are we doing in Waverley to basically address this issue. So what I thought would be helpful is if I took you through some of the examples and give some examples of the work that's currently going on within Waverley, and then perhaps as a group then we can say right or wrong direction, what are the things we want to focus on. But obviously there's all these sort of definitions. What I'd like to bring is there are many areas I could have looked at for this, and I didn't want to be flippant, but I wanted us to get home before midnight. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'll focus on what we're doing for the older person. So there are others, in this we've got mothers, children, young people. It's much wider than this. And also for the purpose of this presentation, I've really, when I started looking at it with the team, focused on what's happening within my area with Council Health. So it's quite a sort of focused summary of what's happening. So there's more. I haven't really spoken to my housing colleagues or the planning and really gone into detail, but I think it's important that we have an idea of where we're starting from. So I was proposing, I'll go through the presentation, and then Councillor Else, if you didn't mind, would do summing up at the end, if that's okay. So what are Waverley doing? Right. Well, as we all know, we work very closely with voluntary sector organisations. We've got service level agreements, and the key ones and that's with our community centres, that's with our arts and cultural organisations like Cranley Arts, Farnham Maltings. But I just wanted to give you some little examples of what we're doing. So you've got the Men in Sheds. It's always quite an amusing project, but it's how can you attract men? So sometimes it's men that are lonely, that have lost a partner, then how can we get them? And they found out that sort of working in a shed environment, doing something with their hands was a way of attracting men to a group. Farnham Assist, Knit and Natter, a Pine Point Club. I'm going to that one, I didn't know that one. But Farnham Assist, certainly they're operating out of the Memorial, and they had a fantastic number of people for Sunday lunch just the other week. I think it was nearly 60 meals. And it's something that they're bringing people together to talk, just to chat. The Hopper Diorite, this is sort of, well, I think it says what it says. We are a big borough, and sometimes our sort of connectivity is not the greatest. Hopper, who we support for SLA, is that diarised service that need to go to a hospital appointment, be taken to a community centre. They're there to move our residents around. We'll be bringing something back on community meals in February, but we're now 2 years into running the community meal service that was costing, and it was a frozen meal, costing the council 60,000 a year to deliver. We're now got a service that's standing on its own 2 feet, not subsidised at all from the council, and all of the day centres and community centres that are operating it, and our own downstairs cafe, are making surpluses. So it's getting out, and there's people. Well, there was a story last year, wasn't it? Not last couple of months ago, where one of the people was actually saved. Someone went to deliver a meal to find someone in real distress and was able to contact someone who was on at the ambulance and get some support there. So it's not only is that little bit of communication. I've talked to Councillor Lee here, who I know heavily involved. It's a fantastic service, and what we're really proud of as a service is that it's benefited our community centres as well, which is great. Then we've got the Farnham Area Time Bank. This is where people give time. It's volunteering to give time to help people, taking people to the shops, gardening, simple things. But these, to address someone who's been on their own, on loneliness, isolated, it's fantastic. So that's what we're doing with our voluntary sectors. We carry on. New social prescribing. We've talked about prevention being a key mantle. What's better than having a pill and go home, take a pill, this will make you better, take another pill to deal with the side effects of that pill. There's many other things, if you're feeling lonely, go for a walk, go meet people, get out of the building. Social prescribing, look at all the services that are offered around Waverley, and there are a myriad of options. In the social prescribing function, it's about helping direct people to other services that are not just medication. Falls prevention, I think that talks to yourself. We hold those monthly to make sure people are steady on their feet. The Maltings do a myriad through their things, singing for the mind. People living with dementia and their carers, it's that singing element brings people together, gives the carers a break, also gets people involved. And then you've got another knitting. I think we must be keen on knitting in Waverley. Lunches, we're very lucky in Waverley with volunteers we have, in the voluntary sector we have, and we're very pleased to be working with these organisations very closely. So my team work with Rowley's, Hazelway. That's not only to deliver the community meals, but they get people in using their own minibuses, using the hopper service that we talked about earlier, do activities, getting older people, socialising, getting them into a building, having a nice meal, but also there's activities and sessions, be that sort of, now I'm going off into a subject that my council knows far more about, so I'll be quiet in a minute. But it's getting people thinking, keeping them active, keeping the mind thinking and getting them together. Those, they're in each of our conurbations, do a fantastic service. And then I just wanted to touch on sort of what we offer. So we'll be talking about our health centres later and sort of leisure centres. There's lots more that goes on in there than just the athletic individual. I'm going to keep pointing at myself, but people exercising. It's not about going there being really fit. There's lots that go on in our health and leisure centres, what we like to call them now. So you've got a fantastically active senior group. We used to call it 50 plus, but the reality is we're talking a much older group of people that are coming to our centres. They take over the whole of Farnham on a morning. They take up in the same happens at Cranley and at Godalming. Fantastic group of people coming together. We do exercise referrals for health professionals. So if you go to the doctors, our leisure centres have the trained staff that can take you for an exercise referral, get you fitter. And then we talk about walks for health. So in all our populations, we use the sort of leisure centres as the base, but to be honest, it can be from anywhere where people come together just to walk. Get them to the site. You can take it at your own pace. It's all about volunteer-led, people getting involved. Then we've got fall prevention classes. I don't know what cage cricket is, but I'm sure that's very broad, fully inclusive for and a memory lane cafe, so that we run at the cafe at Cranley. So there's lots happening within our leisure centres. They also outreach as well, so you've got it on the performance monitoring, what other sort of health and wellbeing classes they offer there. But what we shouldn't forget is how volunteering helps people get out there as well. There's lots of opportunities that we offer in Waverley for people to get and help their environment through the countryside across a vast amount of sort of locations. And then I can repeat the arts centre. Nearly everything in Waverley is so well supported by volunteers, but it's good for the volunteers and it's good for the people they're helping. So I want to do a quick run through. So that was just an example of what we're already doing for older people in our borough, and there is loads more, but it's just to give you a flavour. What I didn't want from the last presentation is for members to think at any point that Waverley's behind the curve on what we're doing regarding loneliness and isolation. There's a lot going on. So I'd like to pass over to Councillor Else just to sum up, if that's okay.
Thank you, Kelvin. I haven't got very much to say because I think Kelvin's given a very full account of what we're doing at the moment, but I think that it's important that it's understood by everybody that we do realise that it's loneliness is not just about older people, it's about the whole of the community, all our residents. And a lot of those things that Kelvin has just described actually aren't only for older people. The services that are provided, for example, in the centres are for older and or disabled people, and they can be of any age if they're disabled. Hopper provides a service for people of any age, and they can be younger, to get them out and about. So I think we're already covering quite a large contingency of our community. We may not be doing as much as we would like to do, but what we've got to think about is, are we doing as much as we can do at the moment with the given resources that we have? It's a big, big subject. Social isolation is a very, very big problem. We are already helping with mental health issues, because dementia is a mental health issue, and that can affect any ages. It's not just an elderly condition. It's a disease that can come to anybody at any age. So I think we are doing quite a lot across the board for all ages actually already. Just out of interest, you might be interested to know that the community meals, again, that's not just older people, that's people who are unable to cook themselves for whatever reason. So a lot of these things which sit quite comfortably in our minds as services for older people aren't just for older people. I think it's important that we remember that. Community meals, April 17 to March 18, we delivered 25,000 meals in Waverley. That's quite amazing, I think, and the team are to be congratulated for that. So, as I said, resource is the most difficult thing to find to do everything that we would like to do. But I hope you agree with us that we are doing a lot already. If you want to recommend that we go beyond that, then you have to think very carefully. It's a big piece of work as to how you're going to achieve that, how this council is going to achieve it. And there's a lot of changes coming, as we've just heard anyway. So I think that's my summing up. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions?
Dennis.
We
Sorry
can
to be
always
such a
rely-
trouble.
We can rely on you, Dennis.
The list that you put up on the first slide there, Kelvin. And by the way, I think everybody's doing a wonderful job, and it's so necessary. Do we have a feel for when those were started? In other words, how are they growing? Do we take measurements to suggest that they're becoming more popular and it's a steady growth? I think it's important that we have a view on that, and why one might be lagging behind the other, and then looking at why that might be.
I don't have that information to hand, but you are correct. So through our service level agreements, there is a monitoring requirement. So we would monitor these on a quarterly basis to monitor trends. Certainly the community meals generally in most areas is really on the rise. I think we've got a little bit more work to do in the Cranley area. I think is the area that's probably not come up as much as we would like. But I've gone through the SLA meetings with each of the centres recently, and that is on the rise and being well used. The others will come out through our SLA meetings. Hopper has a slight challenge at the moment in the sense that there's been a change in how legislation really, and how it's been applied by Surrey about who can operate commercial services. So Hopper run school services, basically, to create a profit so they can run the diary, which is not a profit making sort of part of their service, but it's their whole reason for being. So they have a challenge at the moment. So we know that their numbers have dropped slightly, but that's much more on how they're having to address the challenges on the change of legislation, so they can now only operate certain runs. But otherwise, we can definitely bring back some information on the other stuff for you.
Can I
Given
just...
Surrey's revisions to how it's operating, there's dangers there for dial-right, greater dangers, is there? What do you think?
Well, can I just say that with Hopper, they've been dealt a huge blow this year because of the way that a potential legislation has been interpreted by Surrey. It hasn't actually been put into practice yet, it's just potential. Surrey lawyers decided that Hopper, as a charity, couldn't tender for commercial contracts. Now, the commercial contracts that they tender for are school contracts, so they've lost the school contracts. They've actually lost them. They've been awarded elsewhere now. So that is a huge blow to them. I think they're yearly, they're missing 80,000, 100,000 pounds that they've got to try and make up, which, you know, how can they do that? We can only give them so much. We do give them, you know, we do give them a grant, which is quite substantial, but obviously it's not going to help with that kind of gap. We just don't have that to give. So Hopper they're doing very well, and they're being very optimistic, and they're working very hard, and they need all the help that we can possibly give them. If there's ever any opportunity that we can help them in, it's very important that we do, but they are in trouble. And that will be a huge blow to a lot of people in the borough as well, so that's...
I guess that must be because it's seen as anti-competitive for the...
Correct. There was a challenge in, I think it's somewhere in the north of England.
Newcastle or Nottingham or somewhere like that.
So basically, yes, where commercial firms were saying it was they had an unfair advantage. Sort of it's a judgment call, but they've taken sort of the most risk-averse approach to most county councils, where they've now said the charitable, they must have a certain licence to tender, which basically is costly and puts basically the Hopper wouldn't go into that. They turn themselves into a private sort of mini bus hire, so they've got to take a lot of the seats out of the buses. They can take a maximum of eight people in the buses for school runs. They've changed their model slightly. I agree with Jenny that they've really thought it, whether they're being over optimistic or not, but they've certainly got a business plan to get them back up on their feet next year, but they've taken a huge hit this year.
And just out of interest, the Woking, Bustler, their bus service is called Bustler, they don't have this problem yet because they've still got, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 years, probably it might be 2 years left on the contract. But Hopper's contract ran out this year, so that's why they've been hit very heavily.
Just one other comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman. You expressed it very well. People go to the doctors, have a pill for this, have a pill for that, and everything. Is there scope for, have the surgeries been made aware? And I don't mean by notices on the notice board, because I don't think I'm that alone. I'm absolutely sign blind these days. I mean by taking the message to the surgeries and taking the doctors through so that they've got an opportunity to sort of say to their patients when we recognise them, well, just a minute.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I'll kick off with Tamsin, maybe able to answer more, but we have a very, there's a GP referral system that we have that all GPs are aware of, so that they can refer to the leisure centres for an exercise programme or sort of any sort of exercise programme, isn't it? So that is in place, but if I'm completely honest, I can't remember. Would you have a number off the top of your head? How many we have roughly? It's a pitiful amount, if we're honest, that GPs aren't referring.
All I'm asking is, can we not do something to reinforce? Because what you're doing is absolutely fundamental.
I think it's something we have go for it.
So we've got a contract health and wellbeing manager, Gemma Jones, and she has written to every single GP within Waverley direct, because she's tried going through the surgeries and has hit dead ends. So she's written to every GP personally to tell them about the GP referral scheme and give them the forms and tell them exactly what we can offer across the leisure centres, across the borough. So she's done everything possible. She's gone through the practice managers, but she's also written directly to the GPs just to highlight the services.
Probably not.
Not a lot, unfortunately. It's incredibly difficult. Yeah.
It's probably the challenge where the position that we're sitting on with the integrated pet care partnership that we talked about before, about prevention. You know, this is something we've got to get across to the GPs. You know, they'll be at the CCGs, and we'll keep pushing that message. It's an opportunity where we've got to keep pressing it, because we can do health checks at the leisure centres. It's not just GP referrals. You can stroke rehabilitation, cardiac rehab. You know, there's so much there. We just need them to be thinking about that in the first or second instance. So it'll be probably something that Louise and I can take away as a challenge on our prevention group, to keep banging the drum, really, councillor, and getting that into the forefront of their minds.
But to sell it to them on the basis now, if you sort of refer these people, is it going to save so much cost on your prescriptions?
And that does seem to be the direction of travel, as Louise alluded to earlier, that prevention is better than cure. But it's a very big change of direction, you know. And that,
new culture.
Yeah, new way of thinking. But it's there. We've got it's well set up within our leisure centres to deliver that.
Yes, please. Yes. Yeah, I was just going to compliment you on your list on page 32, which is fairly inclusive and covers, as you said at the beginning, not just the elderly or the people with dementia, etc. Now, a lot of these will already be in contact because of, say, if you say the unemployed, the disabled, carers, will be in touch with organisations that can perhaps direct them to what Waverley can provide or help them with. But there are others which are going to be under the radar, the new mums, the newly divorced, perhaps even the newly bereaved or retired. And I just wonder what we can do to reach out to them, to encourage them to get involved with what we as a Borough Council can provide for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's another. It's a good challenge. We should be able to hit that through, obviously, GPs. We should be able to check that through. We could be. That's a very good point, actually. We haven't thought about how we can hit them, but you're right. There's a myriad of options. I'm just thinking, my wife is a midwife, so I'm sort of thinking, actually, you could be catching it at NCT classes. We should be picking people up, but they should be being referred even from maternity services if there's an issue of, say, isolation or loneliness. And that's something we haven't actually addressed. But that's a good comment. Perhaps linking more to the hospitals, and that would be a way of linking in that safeguard, because that's something we haven't done yet.
Yeah. I see a bit of a parallel with the health area here, actually. As a borough, we've now recognised the health implications of all the services that we provide. It doesn't mean we've set up a separate department, the health department. We're not going to be setting up a separate loneliness department, but perhaps it's an education thing that we need to encourage everybody to realise that there's loneliness implications in many of the things we do. So in the same way we've now got this phrase of health and everything, you could have a similar thing with loneliness. Yeah,
absolutely.
It becomes an education thing with the officers and the councillors.
Yeah, that mindset. You know,
that mindset. Because I say we're not going to set up a loneliness department or anything like that, but there's so much we do that can help, and all the housing and all the services we provide. Yeah. If we're thinking about health, we should be thinking about loneliness as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah, I agree. And loneliness, I mean, a lot of these people wouldn't even know that they were lonely. And they might end up going down the depression route or whatever, couldn't they? Which impacts on our health service.
Absolutely.
The whole thing is prevent.
Yes, absolutely.
Prevention is better than cure.
Do you want Yasmin to do a bit about that seminar we went to?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, as you've got on, it's all linked in with the loneliness thing. So Councillor Wheatley and I went to a seminar on social isolation and loneliness quite recently. I think it was late October. So you've got that sort of summary, agenda item 7 there. What I did want to mention as discussion was flowing. The point 2 on page 32, a connected society, a strategy for tackling loneliness. We talked a lot about GP referrals and social prescribing this evening. That is a major part of the loneliness strategy, the government's loneliness strategy, which has recently been published, so October 18. So that's something the government are aware of as well, and that will play a major part, I think, nationally, to tackle the problem of loneliness. But I don't have much more to say other than what's on the report already. It was a very interesting day. Lots of different organisations were represented, health organisations, charities, from actually across the country, across the UK. So it was very, very interesting. And I think Councillor Wheatley and I sort of realised through the day that Waverley are quite ahead of the game on it, and that we're doing a lot already. And I think, maybe sort of setting the trend in that way. Maybe with a Manchester of loneliness, but it's it's a very interesting. It was an interesting day, and I don't know if Councillor Wheatley had anything else to.
Well, actually, another point they mentioned was that it goes even younger than university people, because you can have youngsters that get uprooted and planted in a school, and they're surrounded by people, but they don't know anybody, and if somebody doesn't actually sort of take them under their wing, they can feel very isolated and insecure. Same when they go to secondary school, they may or may not end up with some of their own chums from the primary school. But going back to Hopper, of course, we do have our care in the community driving scheme in Binscombe and Farnham, and our Hopper gentleman didn't realise we'd been going for 7 years. And that has impacted on their numbers, because our people because they can't afford Hopper's rates, often people in Binscombe and Farnham. So our own schemes, we are doing our best to help. And as we've always said about the community meals, the fact that that person saved someone's life, we've always said when the food wasn't up to it, the visit was what was so important. Well, now they get good food as well, so it's doubly good. But yes, it is all to do with prevention. We used to have this lady who, was it Fiona? For a very short time, we were a pilot scheme for trying to find people who were isolated. And she came to Godalming for a short while.
Do you know what this? Councillor Else brought this to my attention and reminded me of it. We had some funding from the King's Fund to do we created a film actually that summarised all the things Waverley Cares, of which the role you're talking about was part of what was called the PPP fund from Surrey, the Personal Prevention Project Fund, something like that. Thank you. Unfortunately that funding was cut.
Yes.
But what we did think would be useful is if we brought that film back to here at your next ONS, just as a start of it, because I thought it does bring to life exactly what's happening in Waverley, and at a given time. So some of those projects may not be running now, but I think it will be another good thing for you to see what's going on. That was me.
Can I also mention, I think the faith communities are very important in this whole thing. I think Busbridge Church set up a befriending scheme as part of that, that PPP funding. So, and I think they're still going. But I know with the Faith Forum, I mean, they provide a lot of support to lonely people, and they often get to know people who need support. So I think faith communities are very important.
Okay. Any other points?
I was just going to say, it's not very helpful here, I suppose, but I think that, GPs are always the stumbling block in a lot of things. Not all GPs, because there are some who are really forward-thinking and really sign up to it all. But it has been admitted to me by a former health secretary that GPs are quite difficult to work with sometimes, because they've got their own agenda and they don't want to necessarily change that. But if you've got high cholesterol, the doctors are very keen to get you on statins, so they get paid a certain amount, don't they? For everybody they sign up onto statins. If we could somehow get the government to have a look at if they refer people on social prescription, they get X amount, they might do it. I'll have to suggest that. They are the problem in the whole sort of cycle
That's interesting.
for us.
That's interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think you're on again. Well, no, it's now Camden is on. We talked about the Leisure Centre Management Contract review.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, back in November 2016, a subcommittee was brought together to review the management of the Leisure Centre contract, and as such a list of recommendations were made, which start on page 36. And what I'm very pleased to be able to report is that of the 19 actions, 16 are complete, and the 3 that aren't are actually all in progress. So there is one highlighted red, but actually that is now amber and in progress. So really, really positive news to report on that. One of the priority recommendation number 1 was that we were requested to develop a leisure centre policy, and that's now being developed and is attached in your at page 41, Annex 1, for your approval really to take forward for adoption. So it's whether there's any comments on the policy and whether there's any questions on the other actions or recommendations.
Any comments?
Can I just add a comment that the policy can't be approved here. It's either the executive or council. I can't totally remember. So it's a draft. Sorry, it's a draft. Sorry, it's a draft to comment on, and then it will go bar any comments, and it will go up to.
Can you recommend approval?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I bring up a comment, which isn't actually my own comment, it was actually from Jerry Hyman, Councillor Hyman, who was chairman of the previous committee and involved with this subgroup. Yes. His slight concern, he accepted, I think, that most of his recommendations have been well progressed. He had a slight concern about the policy, whether we were being clear enough about why we're in the leisure centre business. Are we in the leisure centre business purely from the health aspect? Or are we actually trying to make money for the council out of it? Or are we trying to balance the two? And he felt that this policy didn't make that quite clear enough. So it's not my question, but I'm passing on his question for you to comment on.
Okay.
Well, we've tried to be clear with the policy statement. Waverley Borough Council is committed to providing leisure centres and maximising their use to increase participation and the health and wellbeing of the community. I think the focus of the policy is that we want to increase participation. I think there is a sort of natural after that, if there's more people using it, then hopefully there will be a greater sort of surplus at the end of profit share. But I think what we're trying to say with this, what we are trying to say, I believe, is the reason we're in this is for health, is to increase uses, get people active, and maximise that health and wellbeing opportunity. Now, if we would you believe? Was that?
Yes,
that's where we're going.
Yeah.
We need to make that clearer. That's certainly something we can pull out.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's my personal view. That's what we should be doing, actually. Yeah. Because again, if we actually moved into the area we're in it to make money, we'd get into the competitive area, wouldn't we? A bit like Hopper have, that we'd be seen as unfairly competing with David Lloyd or all these other people. So I think we should be in it to make sure we don't lose money, but in fact make a modest surplus. But in my own view, the principal reason should be the health reason and the health benefits reason, rather than making money. I don't know if anyone else feels that controversial. That's just my personal view.
Can I say, Chairman, that it's
course.
not quite the same to compare. Hopper is a charity, whereas places what they call now,
Places
Leisure now, they've changed their name, are a commercial business. So it's slightly different.
But they will want to make money out of it, clearly. But we obviously do this profit share with them. So
you're right. That will be their focus, to make them successful leisure centres, and that would in essence mean a profit. Our focus as a council was to ensure that they deliver a good service for our residents, that it's clean, all those things, but also we ensure that they do the health and wellbeing elements, the additional elements that if you were purely in making money, say David Lloyd, they wouldn't run stroke rehabilitation classes or cardiac rehab or health checks, because that's not where you make money. So that's where we see us dovetailing with that.
Well, that's our unique selling point, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
These ancillary services.
Absolutely, it's a wide range of services.
Yeah, it's absolutely wrong to just try and break even, let alone make a loss. Have something to support all this activity.
And we do need to be making money somewhere in the services that we're doing. Otherwise, we won't have the £750 that we give to voluntary organisations every year. It's all, I know it's not, that's a very simplistic view, but we do need to be making money somewhere out of the services that where we're able to.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that that was one of our objectives, to make a reasonable level of profit out of it, not?
Our main intention is to provide a quality service, and to improve the health and wellbeing of our residents. That's our number one priority from the contract. But
as efficiently as possible.
As efficiently and effectively as possible. So yes, absolutely, we want to maximise profit and maximise the profit share that we receive, but not to the detriment of providing the services. That's what matters, is providing those quality services.
But I suppose the question that Councillor Hyman may have been raising is whether that needs to be sort of explicit. You know, this is we have a service that you, as a council, you don't have to run. So it certainly shouldn't be a drain on the council taxpayer. So it may be that there needs to be perhaps an explicit sort of, that this should be a surplus or a not money making. That sounds terrible, but it should provide. It should not be a drain on the council taxpayers.
I think that is the way of doing it.
Yeah.
As efficiently as possible.
I mean, it is fair to say though that policies do and should drive decision making.
Yeah.
So the policy should make it quite clear what we're trying to achieve, and that should drive the decisions that we take. Yeah, so in that sense, I think Jerry may have a little bit of a point.
Yeah.
That maybe it needs to be slightly clarified. And I don't think we should go into it too much more here, but perhaps, as it was his point, you can maybe take up with him separately, and the other members of the previous committee, like Wyatt and Richard Seabrook was part of it as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, they would have been very aware that it does provide a surplus. I suppose our challenge as a leisure service is that's not the primary focus of it, but it does create a surplus for the council.
And I think that's perfectly, that can be validated. I think that's perfectly acceptable, and as it should be. But I learned something quite interesting when I first took on this portfolio, and you may or may not know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly what people are getting at our leisure centres is actually a far better offer than they will get at a private gym. Their equipment is absolutely replaced every 5 years. Brand new equipment. And who comes along and buys the old equipment? All the private gyms. So we are giving a really good, via, what are they called now?
Places Leisure.
Places Leisure. Places Leisure. That doesn't actually say anything to me. I can't get into my head. But Places Leisure are giving a really good deal, I think, to our residents. I really am quite convinced.
It's a wonderful amenity of the borough, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you see the usage figures when Nora talks. The number of people that use these facilities is quite astronomical, really.
I think it works very well for all of them.
I think some of the private ones probably do have good equipment, but they're very, very expensive. Some of the ones that have the top level equipment.
I think that's the other point, Chairman, that we do provide. Do we still do in-do cards? I mean, for people who are on benefits,
access to leisure.
Access to leisure is incredibly important because not everybody can afford a gym, and so that's a really important role.
Free for looked after children. There's free usage of the centres, so it's there's more to it than just let's make money.
Is that well publicised?
The cared for children service isn't publicised, but all of our family services and the Surrey teams are aware of it, so obviously they refer the appropriate people. Access to leisure, which is the 50% discount to all of the leisure centres for people on certain benefits or low incomes or carers or people in the services.
Students as well, isn't it?
And some students, yes, are sort of marketed more widely.
Great.
I keep meaning to join the farm one myself because it would do me a lot of good, but being a councillor doesn't seem to give you very much time. There we go.
Chairman,
Okay.
could I just ask one?
Sure.
Please.
Recommendations table, it's lovely to see all that green. Only the two in the amber at item number 17. Is there any comment you can make on progress or lack of progress? Is it not very high under the Referring Services scheme of priorities and things?
It's a PFP, or Places Leisure as they are now called, have their
You
own
couldn't spell for
have their own sort of apprenticeship scheme specific to sort of the leisure industry, and that's not a specific course that Waverley Training Services can offer. However, we can offer customer care, business support, so there is a linkage there. But at the moment, they're operating they offer, I can't remember the numbers, but they do their own apprenticeship scheme. I think the challenge was, could we link them more with Waverley Training Services? And the answer was, to a point. You know, they have.
Has this any real importance anymore for consideration, do you think?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't say so.
So it might as well be taken out.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we did. Yeah.
If you're happy with that as a
Sorry, I am.
yeah.
Sorry, folks.
Any other points on the contract review? Well, thank you very much, Sandra, for that. The next item is the corporate performance report from Nora.
Before you conclude,
Oh.
Chairman, do you
Okay.
want to recommend that policy going forward with the slight amendments that we've been talking about? It would go to the executive and then on to council. Do you want to, agree that it goes forward?
Well, are we all agreed to that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed with that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've now agreed. Thank you. Right, I think we're on to the corporate performance report.
Thank you, Chairman. I just would like to take this opportunity and thank all the members for the very valuable comments we received last time around that shaped the new format of the report. So hopefully the proposed changes that we've included now in the report will make the analysis of the data much more transparent going forward. As the members are aware, the report contains the data for all the service areas, but this committee specifically looks and scrutinizes community and well-being area, which can be found on the page. The agenda. 65. On the page 65 of the agenda. If there are any questions related to the report which aren't part of the remit of the committee, I'm happy to receive them outside of the committee and address them to the relevant officers and come back to you with any answers if that is the case. The performance in the second quarter was very good. All the indicators performed on target. As Kelvin mentioned, we had very good attendance to the leisure centres. There's also a proposal being prepared at the moment to introduce a new target for the number of Careline clients, which will align it with the corporate target of an increase, 5% annual increase until 2020, which is quite an ambitious target, and we will be coming with it will be a growing target that will be changing every quarter going forward. So at the next meeting, hopefully we'll have some information for you to advise exactly how this target will be changing going forward for the growth of the Careline clients number. All service plans were progressing well on track. There are 4 of them which a little bit off track, and the actions are being taken to rectify them. We have revised dates, but all of them are expected to still be finished before the end of this financial year. And I think that's probably, there's no specific recommendations related to the report. So I think we're just waiting for the observations and comments that the committee might have about the report. It's probably all for me.
Mr. Chairman, is there anything we can do about sort of marketing Careline, letting people aware that, for instance, I know a lady who lives on her own, and she said that her children are sometimes a little bit concerned, and I said, well, have you been in touch with Waverley for Careline? She said, oh, I didn't think I could. I said, yes, you can, and I'm sure they'll be delighted to help you.
I think Ken will provide a little bit more details, but we have business and marketing plan in place to allow us the growth of the base going forward. So
yeah, it's been it's been a strange one with an ageing population. You would assume that the Careline numbers would grow, but the reality is it's actually been a very static client base for a number of years. You are correct, Councillor. I think the objective, as Nora alluded to, is we need to push the marketing, push the promotion. So we've gone out, obviously in your Waverley, we went out with all the council tax information. There was a leaflet to every resident. But I think exactly what you're doing is what we need everyone to do. It's word of mouth, it's promotion. So that's something that the team in the marketing plan we really work on. And it's about referrals as well as just new people off the sort of street on the bed.
Are you able to say, please, what it might cost somebody to get into the scheme?
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I think it's £19 a month, and that's a 24-hour cover. So it goes direct to call centres in Chichester. So it's a fantastic service. I don't think it's in this report, but we've done numbers on how many call-outs we've had on previous ones. Is that on this one, Nora, or is it?
we have the response rate
Where is it?
to the fault, CS11, so how many faults were responded to within the 48 hours time scale, which is 100%, but we don't have the actual cost of the service included in the report.
Or the number of users.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the number of
Number of users. There's one at the top,
clients.
1,826.
So we have the number of clients that we have in that period, in that quarter. Also, we have the number of Careline calls that we received in that quarter.
So that's how many times the pendant's pressed. Mm-hmm. So that's it's there to see 6,216 times last quarter.
And of course, it's an excellent service because it enables people to be living on their own for longer. Again, prevention.
It's another area where we could be helped greatly by GPs.
Yeah.
Because they know who the people are, but I think, we've tried, I think, haven't we?
Well, we're going to, it's that drum we've got to keep beating because that's Jenny's exactly right. That's, they know the people that need to be referred and it would benefit from it. It's really unobtrusive, it's not, it's something you can wear quite secretly, but, it's not too grand a thing to say. It does save lives. It makes a real difference. And it's just important, the other one, CS11, is just how many faults, because obviously there's faults we pick up, and the team again are around and out and about in the borough, and they're delivering 100% of those, so it's...
Can I come back on that?
Of course.
Going on from there, is there anything we can do to help people when they are on their own to have some kind of code device outside? Because if they can't get to a front door and let someone in, it might not be a lot of good. So, and you don't want to have the key under the doormat.
So, sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but so although I talk about the pendant for Careline, obviously in addition we offer a smoke alarm that links to the system again. So if the smoke alarm goes to a 24-hour call centre, calls emergency services. But in addition, you have key safes. So if people are living on their own, exactly that. It's got a code that's linked with the call centre. So when the button goes off, they'll send emergency services. They'll be able to get into the key safe, and get into the house. So that is again something else we offer as part of the care line service. We also even go into things, bed sensors, if people are, have dementia and get out of bed, or there's pill dispensers that say what pills you should be having at each time of day. It's quite an extensive sort of service we offer. I think it's just getting the message out there, and I think there's even more we could do, because I think one of the sad things, if someone's called and then an ambulance is on its way to help someone who's fallen, if they're still talking and there's an emergency, that ambulance gets directed. So sometimes people that have fallen, have contacted the call centre, have been on the floor for some time, and there's a question of whether we could offer some sort of first response and because a lot of the time it's just helping that person up and getting them sat. It's not always an emergency that needs an ambulance, but we've got to think of what other things we can offer to help our residents, and care line is certainly one of those areas that has a tremendous opportunity for good, really. So I talk about numbers, but it's about what service we can offer, really.
I must admit, if I may, Mr. Chair, several years ago there used to be an elderly lady living underneath us, and I was one of the respondents, as it were, when she had a problem. And it would come to me and a phone, and she fell out of bed, and there was no way I could help her into bed. I just covered her and made sure that she was as comfortable as she could be down there. But they just sent a car, not an ambulance, and therefore she had the rapid response.
Yes.
When it happened 3 times one night, I think they said enough, she must no longer live on her own. But nevertheless, you had that contact there.
Yeah.
Any other points?
Can I just ask for some clarification? It's not to do with the care line, but on the number of visits to the leisure centres. Presumably the Q2 target at the end is for 18-19.
Yes.
I'm just wondering why, if the visits in 17-18 for Q2 were 494,000, why the target for the following year was set at 448,000?
I think
There's a reason for that.
yes, I can address that. I think we have changed the target, I think earlier in the year, to align the figures with, because I think there was one of the leisure centres that have dropped in the figures because of the local competition. So we have Farnham Leisure Centre specifically.
Okay.
So we have changed the target, which now when you compare the quarter, that's why we specified quarter to target, that the target is actually different than the quarter to target in 2017 and 18, but just because of the format restraints, I suppose, we weren't able to include it, but at the time we were still performing on target because the target was different.
Okay, right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at CS10, I know it's not
Care line.
sorry,
yes.
beg your pardon,
Okay.
performance indicators. I know these things, well, I don't think they're going to be very predictable, but did it come as a surprise when quarter 1 18-19 came in at 3,500 as distinct from the previous figures, almost double, and then lo and behold, this last
Back up again.
quarter is also back at 6,000. Did something go wrong then? Was this?
I think it's a very good question, Councillor. I don't think I wouldn't be able to answer
No.
it now, but I'll come back to you with that. If there's anything behind that
Yes.
figure that doesn't instantly spring to mind, I can't think of anything.
And can I just check, you mentioned about the Chichester Centre. Is
Yeah.
that the same centre that takes overflow calls from, say, places like our house if the manager's not there and so can't answer?
Is it?
I ask because
This is with the contract we have here is with Chichester Council, so I don't think it's the same. I'll check. I'll come back and check on that.
That would be housing, and we can find out.
it's only
Yeah.
You'd expect the care line thing to vary for your time of year, wouldn't you?
Yes,
In terms of which quarter you're in. But it seems pretty.
but it does seem low. That one does. Councillor Lee is correct. You look at quarter 1 18-19. There's a lot less
Really
force.
out of-
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tamsin's come up with a good point. You could, we haven't got Q1 from 17-18, so whether that's a trend.
Anyway, going back to the last
Thank you.
report, Q1 from 17-18 was 5,832.
So there is something in that.
There's something there to look at.
Yeah, there is.
Just so as we can be prepared for.
No, thank you. No.
Yeah, look, you're going to get random fluctuations actually.
Yeah, I will go back to the team now and just delve into the figures a little bit more from Chichester as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this is a tremendous reporting format.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Yes, very, very good.
Compliments to everybody, it's much cleaner.
Any other points anyone wants to bring up? Again, we have a recommendation that in terms of this, consider the service areas and make any recommendations to senior manager or the executive as appropriate. Is there anything we feel that we wish to recommend?
Oh, sorry if I've confused, slightly confused. Did there need to be something on care line, or was that already proposed? Do you talk
No,
about?
there is no proposal at this meeting. There's something we will be bringing to the
Bring
next
back.
meeting, so
Yeah.
there's no recommendation to. Okay, people.
I mean, if we all seem to be pretty happy with this reporting format, there doesn't seem to be highlighting anything alarming.
Not in my area at the moment, certainly not.
I mean, it's not actually in our area, but I just observed that planning seems to be an area in which it's you get a higher turnover of staff, and we've just lost some more senior people, haven't we?
I mean, Chairman, on that one, last night's Value for Money O&S committee picked up that point as well and asked for a report on staff turnover to look at the analysis on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult area because there's so much demand for planning officers in both other councils and the private sector.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult area for councils. Okay. So, is there any particular recommendations you'd like to make other than we're broadly satisfied with what we've seen? Okay.
Continue with the format.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're happy that the reporting continues in this format.
And Chairman, I've got those notes of some of the comments you've made that Kelvin, I think, is going to report back on.
Thank you, Ellen.
It's amazing.
I'm with you.
The next slide, there's a work programme, and I think Wendy's going to talk to us about this, but if we look at page 85 of the report.
Page 86 is where the actual table starts. So this is a routine item showing the arising items for consideration. In particular, that there are one or two items for consideration for February, and I know I've already had a conversation as to whether there's one or two too many for February meeting. So one of the questions for tonight was where was the area's focus, or did the committee want to try and look at all of those areas? As you heard from Louise tonight, there's quite a lot happening in the health remit and the landscape going on there. We've got the Memorial Hall project. I know people are interested in having an update. We had potentially teed up the manager, David Brown, for coming and talking to us a bit further about Careline. Anyway, and that's interesting, it's come up on the performance report as well. So, we've got a wide range of things that could happen.
Wendy, is it possible? Sorry, there was one, the leisure centre investment. That may be one that we would struggle to get to February.
Okay.
We're in negotiations, but if there was something that you're saying, we could drop. I think that would be one that we think it might be better to come back at a later one.
So we defer that to
okay, great.
So is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's it. That seems fine.
Can I just comment? Health Inequalities, lead member of the officer, Wendy Cooper, policy officer for scrutiny, and services for active and higher needs residents. Wendy is also, can they not be combined?
weren't actually going to bring that one in February, were we?
No,
No.
no.
Good point.
Still this one.
I'm glad you're reading.
Combine those two items.
I think the focus of the health inequalities one will be on what the local health profile is showing and you know, what if anything is happening
Yes.
about it, plus the sort of the context that Kelvin and I were talking about and giving you a bit more of an update on how that's going, because we'll be well ensconced by then. Kelvin, wasn't it?
No, I'm dragging you now, I'm not dragging you in, you're involved all the way.
He'll be out there preventing everything.
Exactly, yeah. Been main meeting.
We also wondered at the pre-meeting about the hopper service. I mean, it's an extremely important service, but they're going through this big change, and will they be in a position to tell us by the next meeting what they're going to do about all these problems they've got, and in what way can we help as well?
It's a judgment. They would obviously be able to give you an update as to where the challenges they're facing and how they're addressing them. It might, I think if you did it any later, it may be too late. Not in a sense to the diary service, but you know, of any impact that we could have as a group.
You still think it'd be appropriate to have
I think so. Even if it's a brief one, perhaps, Chairman, perhaps my officers will cover it as opposed to Caroline. I'm not Caroline, I'm Hopper.
So it's the leisure centre investment is the one that we defer to the future meeting, yeah?
That's okay.
Okay.
Because with community meals, Mr. Chairman, I think there we need to know how Waverley is coping and whether any solution is being found if they feel it is not the future of the service for so many meals to come from Waverley.
Okay. Yeah, so what we'll look to do with the community meals presentation is we'll break it down by area and talk through, you know, the challenges that each are facing, definitely.
And how they're coping.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
We with that end in mind, we have a workshop coming up with all the providers, community meal providers, so we'll be well equipped to give a good account of how they're going on.
Brilliant.
On the Memorial Hall, Liz and I felt we would like to visit it, and maybe there's a few other people who haven't seen it yet, the new one, so maybe we could arrange another visit.
Absolutely. I know we've missed each other a couple of times, haven't we?
Liz has missed them as well, so
absolutely.
I don't know if there's other members of the committee who would like to see it, so perhaps we could try and fix up another visit.
I will do that. I'm also hopeful for that meeting that I'll have a virtual tour of it as well, so I've got some images being taken, some 3D images, but a tour I could still arrange.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then you'll realise it won't be anything like my 3D image that I produce. Would you like that before the meeting, Chair?
Probably, ideally.
Yeah.
We could have it before the meeting, in January, say.
Yeah, January.
And I could go, I live fairly, I could go along myself, it'd be nice to have a official visit, so to speak.
Yeah.
And shown around by yourselves.
No.
Dennis and I are out of area.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
I think we are, if we defer the leisure centre. I think, is the committee generally happy that we run with this agenda other than the leisure centre investments? That seems to be practical.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
I think that pretty well covers the agenda. But one thing I'd like to bring up, actually, it wasn't on the agenda at all, but I'd just like people to be aware that Surrey are running 5 consultations right now, which some people might know about, some people might not. They're considering the future of things like the libraries, the children's centres, the recycling centres. And it's pretty important that we all respond to these consultations, in fact, because it's all aimed at budget cutting and cost cutting. So, you know, certainly we in Farnham are going to respond, but I think people elsewhere in Waverley should be responding as well. There's 5 consultations, and they all finish on the 4th of January. And you can either get the information from this online from the Surrey website, or you can go to your local library and get paper copies of these consultations. Because it's all big subjects, you know, what our community recycling centres can be closed down. The one in Farnham, for example, was threatened with closure. I mean, that would actually mean very long journeys for Farnham residents, Cranley or not Cranley,
Well, Cranley's
Camberley,
doing as well.
Camberley or
Yes.
Godalming or Whitney. And that would be more like an hour's round trip at least, you know, and that means people won't do it, you know. They'll start dumping stuff, they'll start burning it in the gardens, and that's, and there's potential threats to library services as well, and to children's centres, all very important things. And to be fair to Surrey, I think they'll do this in the best way possible, that they've got a new management at Surrey who are totally concerned to do it as well as they possibly can. But they do have this budget problem, and they're going to have to look at things like, Surrey, for example, spends something like 30% more on libraries than the typical county council, and they're looking to get back to the level of the typical county council. And another thing that's threatened is bus passes for disabled people. They'll still get bus passes, but they won't get the extra benefits of being able to use them before 9:30 in the morning, and they won't be able to bring a carer along free of charge, that type of thing. And Surrey, again, do more than most councils, but they're having to consider doing the same as everybody else. So I think people need to respond to these things. And I think Waverley should be responding as a borough, and I'm sure they will.
We will, yeah.
I'm sure they will as a borough. I just thought I'd bring that up because not enough people seem to be aware of it. I think that probably covers everything. Actually, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
It looks as if